I didn't plan to drive that night. It was already past 11, the kind of hour when roads feel hollow and every decision feels slightly heavier than it should. But my phone buzzed with a reminder I'd ignored all day, and I told myself it would be a quick trip. 20 minutes there, 20 back. Nothing unusual. I'd driven that highway dozens of times before. Same turns, same dim gas station at mile 12, same dead stretch where the radio always lost signal. I turned on my GPS out of habit more than need. The blue line appeared instantly, confident, familiar. I relaxed a little. About 10 minutes in, the voice interrupted the music. Route recalculated. Faster route available. That alone wasn't strange. What made me frown was the suggested turn. It wasn't one I recognized. A narrow road branching off to the right, unlit, unnamed in my memory. I glanced at the map. Everything looked normal. Same colors, same layout, same calm certainty in the interface. I hesitated. The main road continued straight, safe, and predictable. But the GPS showed the alternate route shaving off almost 8 minutes. I remember thinking how ridiculous it was to argue with software that had never been wrong before. So I turned. The asphalt narrowed almost immediately. Trees closed in on both sides, their branches swallowing what little moonlight there was. I checked my signal, full bars. The GPS didn't stutter. No glitches, no freezing. The voice sounded the same as always. After a minute or two, I realized something was off. There were no reflectors on the road, no mailboxes, no driveways, just pavement and forest stretching farther than felt reasonable. I slowed down and zoomed in on the map. The road had a name now, one I'd never seen before. I tried to say it out loud, just to ground myself, but it felt awkward in my mouth, like a word from a language I didn't quite know. "Continue straight," the GPS said calmly. I considered turning around, but the map showed a clean loop ahead, reconnecting me to the highway. It made sense, enough sense that I kept going. That's when I noticed how quiet it had become. No wind, no insects. Even the hum of my engine felt muted, like the sound was being absorbed by something thick and unseen. I checked the clock. Only a few minutes had passed, but it felt longer. Stretched. Then the screen flickered once. Not enough to panic me, just enough to make my stomach tighten. "Destination ahead," the voice announced. I laughed under my breath, uneasy. "That's not possible," I said to the empty car. The road bent sharply and ended. Ahead of me, illuminated by my headlights, stood a single house, and the GPS spoke again. "You have arrived." I didn't move. I just sat there, staring, already aware of the quiet certainty settling in my chest. I had never entered an address. I forced myself out of the car, though my legs felt heavier than they should. The night air was cold, sharp enough to sting my cheeks, but it couldn't shake the sweat forming along my spine. The house sat there quietly, almost smug, a solitary silhouette with one dim light in the upper window. Everything else was dark. No other houses, no streetlights, no pavement markings beyond the shoulder I had just driven. I stepped closer, hesitant, my phone still in hand. The GPS glowed, showing the same arrow pointing straight at the front door. I opened Google Maps, typing the street name that had appeared earlier. Nothing. Blank space. No houses, no road. Just a smear of gray where my city should have continued. My pulse quickened. This had to be some kind of software glitch. Maybe a weird overlay, a new construction zone, something temporary that hadn't updated in the system. That made sense. Right, it had too. I reached for my car door handle, planning to leave, and froze. The map on my phone changed. The blue route that had led me here now extended into the property itself. It outlined a path from the road to the front steps, like the GPS was drawing it in real time. My thumb hovered over the screen, wanting to dismiss it, but curiosity kept me rooted. A sound broke the silence. Just the faintest creak of floorboards, like someone stepping inside the house. My eyes darted to the front window. Nothing. Yet the feeling was undeniable. I wasn't alone. I backed up a step, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. The GPS recalculated again. "Proceed to destination," it said. Calm, neutral, unflinching. The street was still empty, but something had changed. The shadows along the tree line were sharper, closer. I could swear one of them moved when I blinked. I took another step back. Then my phone vibrated in my pocket, a text from an unknown number. I don't usually get messages from strangers, but I opened it anyway. "You're here. Don't go inside." No signature. No number that made sense, just those words. I swallowed hard. My rational brain screamed that someone was playing a prank, but the hair on my arms stood straight. The GPS didn't stop. It kept the arrow glowing, the voice calm, insistent. "You have arrived." I looked back at the empty road, then at the house. The light upstairs flickered once, like it was acknowledging me, and for the first time I felt it clearly. I hadn't chosen this road. This road had chosen me. I knew then I was no longer just on a wrong turn. I was somewhere I shouldn't be, somewhere that didn't exist. The house waited, silent, patient, and I felt somehow that it had been waiting for me all along. I hesitated at the bottom step, my hands trembling despite my best efforts to stay calm. The front door looked ordinary, painted a dull, peeling gray, but there was something in its stillness that made my stomach twist. My phone still glowed in my hand. The GPS arrow pointed straight ahead, unwavering. The voice repeated once more, smooth and neutral, "Proceed to destination." I tried to reason with myself. It was just an old house. Maybe abandoned. Maybe someone inside playing a joke, but nothing about the night felt normal anymore. Not the road, not the shadows, not the way the air had thickened around me. I reached for the door handle. Cold metal. I twisted it slowly. It moved, surprisingly smooth. The door creaked open, and I stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of mildew and dust, like the house had been sealed for years, yet there was a warmth that made my skin crawl. The living room was dimly lit by a single lamp in the corner. Old furniture lined the walls. A sofa with a sagging cushion, a coffee table covered in dust, and a bookshelf full of thick, yellowed volumes. Everything looked normal, almost too normal, as if the house was waiting to prove itself real. I took a step forward, then froze. There on the sofa lay a photograph, my photograph. Not one I recognized immediately, but unmistakably me, sitting on a park bench I hadn't visited in months. The frame was old, cracked along the edges. My pulse quickened. How had it gotten here? A noise echoed from upstairs, a floorboard creaking under weight. My breath caught. I called out, my voice shaking. "Hello, is anyone there?" Silence. Then another creak, closer this time. I tried to back away toward the door, but the house seemed to stretch. The hallway was longer than it had any right to be. Shadows clung to the corners, shifting just out of clear sight. My hands gripped my phone tighter. The GPS arrow now led me down the hallway, inside the house. I wanted to scream. I wanted to leave. But something inside me, a morbid curiosity, a stubborn disbelief, kept me moving forward. At the end of the hallway, a door stood slightly ajar. A faint light spilled out. I pushed it open and froze. The room was empty, except for a mirror mounted on the wall. But in its reflection, I saw more than myself. The reflection was delayed by a fraction of a second. And then it smiled. I stumbled back, heart hammering, but the floor beneath me groaned under weight that wasn't mine. The reflection didn't stop smiling. My hands shook as I dropped my phone. It landed screen up. The GPS arrow now pointed straight at the mirror. "You have arrived." I bolted toward the nearest exit. The front door slammed in my face before I could reach it. I was trapped. Panic clawed at me, a raw, tangible thing. I tried the windows, they wouldn't budge. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming from every direction at once. The house was alive with movement, though no one was visible. Shadows danced along the walls, and for the first time I understood. This place didn't just wait for people. It studied them. It knew them. And now it had me. I ran back to the hallway, breathing hard, desperate for any exit. The mirror's reflection followed me, grinning wider. My only thought, frantic and sharp, was that I should never have turned onto that road. But the GPS had chosen for me, and the house had welcomed me in. I stumbled through the hallway, every step echoing like a drumbeat in the suffocating silence. My hands scraped along the walls, trying to keep my bearings, but the house seemed to shift around me. The hallway stretched longer than it should have, doors appearing and disappearing as I passed. My rational mind screamed at me to turn back, to leave, to run, but something rooted me to the floor. Curiosity, fear, a compulsion I couldn't name. One door stood slightly open, light spilling like a warning. I pushed it gently. The room inside was small and cluttered, like a study someone had abandoned in a hurry. Papers lay scattered across a desk. Old photographs covered the walls. I froze. Each one showed scenes I recognized, or at least people I recognized, though I didn't know them personally. And then I saw it, a photograph of me, not recent, not a snapshot from a phone. An old Polaroid, edges yellowed, showing me walking down a street I hadn't visited in years. I blinked, certain my eyes were deceiving me. I picked it up. The back had writing in a hand that was eerily familiar, my handwriting. Words I didn't remember writing. I see you. You will come here. You have no choice. My stomach twisted. I dropped the photograph. That's when I noticed the floorboards. One creaked under a weight that wasn't mine. I looked around, no one there. Yet the sense of being watched intensified, as if the walls themselves were leaning closer. I turned, intending to leave, but the door had vanished. Panic surged. I bolted to the nearest hallway, but every turn led me back to the study. The photographs on the walls shifted subtly with each glance, rearranging themselves. Faces in the pictures, people I didn't know, began to look older, their expressions twisted, fearful. And each time I focused, I saw myself somewhere in the frame, often closer to the lens than before, as if I was moving forward through someone else's memories. A faint sound drifted from upstairs, a voice, low and muttering. I couldn't understand the words, but I recognized the cadence of someone speaking my name. It was distant, yet insistent, like a call through water. My legs moved before my mind could process it, carrying me upstairs. The stairs groaned underfoot. Dust rose in pale clouds. In the middle of the landing, I froze. Another photograph, larger than the rest, stood propped against the wall. It was me, sleeping in my own bed, the room as it had looked that morning. And there, barely visible in the corner of the frame, a shadow crouched. It didn't move when I blinked, but the feeling of its gaze pierced me through the glass. I backed away. My phone slipped from my pocket, clattering against the stairs. The screen lit up. The GPS arrow now pointed straight at the photograph. Calm, unyielding, it whispered again, "You have arrived." My breath caught. My rational mind screamed to leave, but the house had already claimed me. It wasn't just a place. It was a record, a memory, a trap. And I was no longer walking through a stranger's home. I was walking through someone else's past, one that somehow knew me better than I knew myself. The floorboards creaked again, closer this time. I could hear faint whispers from behind the walls, murmuring secrets I hadn't spoken out loud. The house was alive in ways I couldn't comprehend, and the realization hit me like ice. It had been waiting for me for a long time. I had no choice. I forced myself out of the study, though my legs shook with every step. The hallway stretched endlessly, doors opening into rooms I didn't remember seeing before. Each room was filled with objects that seemed plucked from my life, or someone's life I hadn't lived yet. A child's drawing on a fridge, a pair of shoes I recognized from a trip last summer, a coat hung neatly on a chair. Everything felt staged, calculated, as if the house had been observing me for years. Finally, I found a small doorway leading outside, or at least I thought it did. Instead of fresh air, I found a narrow corridor that seemed to loop back inside. My rational mind fought against the impossible. I told myself I must be tired, hallucinating, dreaming. But the evidence kept piling up. The photographs, the rearranging furniture, the whispered echoes. Nothing in my life had prepared me for this. I remembered the archives downtown. I needed proof, something tangible that could explain even a fraction of what I'd seen. Maybe it would snap me out of this nightmare. I bolted back to my car, ignoring the strange creaks and whispers that followed me. The engine roared to life, though the GPS now showed only one destination, straight ahead into the darkness. When I reached the archives, I was shaking. I explained the address, the house, the impossible road. The clerk raised an eyebrow and typed quickly. The screen displayed a single result: an old address demolished decades ago after a series of disappearances. Families vanished without trace, police reports closed with no leads. My city's records confirmed it. The house shouldn't exist. Not here, not now. I blinked at the screen, my hands trembling. The dates of disappearance were all eerily aligned with today, across multiple years. One name caught my eye, someone who lived on the street I'd driven from earlier. I read aloud, half in disbelief, half in fear. And then I saw it. The last entry, a note that the victim had been seen entering a house that was not on any map, GPS or otherwise. The report ended with one chilling sentence: "No one has ever returned." I stumbled out of the archives, heart hammering. The streets outside were empty. My phone vibrated violently. I checked it. GPS had recalculated again. The arrow pointed to the demolished house. Calm voice: "You have arrived." Every rational thought I had screamed to ignore it, but deep down I knew I couldn't. The house had marked me. It had traced me across time and space, through streets that didn't exist, through memories that weren't mine. And now the proof was in the city records. It was real, even if reality refused to admit it. The wind picked up as I drove back. Every shadow along the road seemed alive. The headlights flickered. And there, at the end of the empty street, I saw it, silhouetted, waiting as if welcoming me home. The house hadn't moved. I had. Somewhere deep inside, I realized the terrible truth. I wasn't just lost. I had been chosen. I thought I could outrun it. I convinced myself that I could leave the city behind, take any road, any highway, and the nightmare would dissolve in daylight. I was wrong. The GPS recalculated again while I was on the main street. No matter which direction I turned, the arrow insisted I go back. Back to the demolished house. My rational mind refused to accept it, but the evidence was undeniable. The arrow moved on its own, leading me as if it knew my thoughts. Every instinct screamed to stop, to destroy the device, but when I threw it from the window, it reappeared in my lap moments later, glowing, insistent. The city streets felt different. Shadows lingered where there shouldn't have been any. Empty alleys whispered. A figure appeared briefly at a corner, hunched and fast-moving, then vanished. My pulse raced, each beat echoing the terror growing in my chest. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles whitened, but my legs shook uncontrollably. I tried to call the police. The line rang endlessly. Even 911 refused to connect. The world outside the car had become a void. Panic clawed at me. Then the first real accident happened. A black SUV came out of nowhere. I swerved instinctively. Tires screeched, metal collided, and glass shattered. Pain shot through my shoulder, sharp and real, but it was nothing compared to the terror pressing down on my chest. I scrambled out, coughing, bleeding slightly, heart hammering. When I looked up, the road ahead was empty. No SUV, no skid marks, nothing but the GPS arrow glowing on my dashboard. "You have arrived." I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to see the house. But every exit, every route, every street led me straight to it. The city had folded, looped, and twisted itself to ensure my return. Every instinct, every shred of self-preservation was meaningless against the path the house demanded. By the time I reached the outskirts, my hands were raw from gripping the wheel. My shoulder throbbed, a dull ache that reminded me I was still alive. The sky was heavy, clouds low, moon obscured. And then I saw it. At the end of a familiar, empty street, the house rose, solitary and waiting. The light upstairs flickered. I felt the weight of the unseen eyes inside pressing against me, assessing, patient. I parked automatically, almost as if I had no choice. My legs moved on their own as I approached. Each step echoed too loudly in the cold night. The front door stood closed, ordinary, yet I knew better. I had been here before, but never truly. The GPS sat in my hand, screen bright, calm, indifferent. "You have arrived." I could not resist. I could not flee. I was already inside its plan, and the house knew it. The house waited. I could feel it before I even reached the door, an almost tangible presence pressing against my chest, cold and patient. The night was silent except for the faint hum of my own heartbeat and the subtle creak of floorboards beneath my steps. The GPS glowed steadily in my hand. "You have arrived." The words weren't just directions anymore. They were a declaration. I reached for the doorknob. Cold metal, familiar, yet impossibly heavy. The door opened without resistance, as if it had expected me all along. Inside, everything was perfectly normal. The living room was tidy, the furniture untouched. But my eyes were drawn to the hallway. Shadows pooled there, deeper than any natural darkness, stretching toward me like liquid. I knew instinctively that stepping forward would commit me to something irreversible. I tried to turn back. The door slammed shut. No lock, no handle, just a heavy, final thud. I was trapped. The air grew warmer, almost suffocating. Faint whispers circled from the walls, incoherent yet filled with purpose. I stumbled down the hall, the photographs on the walls shifting and flickering with each glance. Faces that weren't mine stared, then twisted into grins or silent screams. And then I saw it, my own face among them, older, distorted, etched with fear that hadn't yet occurred. I bolted toward the stairs. Every step groaned under my weight, but also under something else. Behind me, a soft, deliberate tapping followed. I turned the corner, nothing. Yet the sound persisted, growing louder, closer, matching the rhythm of my own heart. My breath came fast, shallow. Pain from my shoulder reminded me I was still human, still vulnerable. But the house didn't care. The house had always known me, better than I knew myself. At the top of the stairs, a single door waited. The faint light from beneath spilled into the hallway, inviting, demanding. I stepped inside. The room was empty except for a mirror mounted on the far wall. I froze. The reflection that greeted me was delayed by a fraction of a second. And then it smiled. Not me, not my expression, something else wearing my face. I staggered back. My phone slipped from my grip, clattering to the floor. The GPS arrow pointed to the mirror. Calm, unyielding. "You have arrived." My pulse thundered in my ears. I tried the door. Locked. Windows, unyielding. Air. Thick, nearly solid. Every instinct screamed escape, but there was none. The house pulsed around me, alive, patient, and immovable. Footsteps circled, always just beyond vision. Whispers pressed into my mind, recounting memories I hadn't shared, secrets I hadn't spoken. Every reflection, every photograph, every creak of floorboards reminded me. This was not a mistake. This was a choice I never made. I sank to the floor, shaking, chest tight. Outside, the city slept as if nothing had happened. Inside, time didn't pass. Space folded. The house waited, eternal, infinite, patient. And the last thing I heard before the darkness closed around me, before the walls seemed to swallow my form, was the voice of the GPS, calm, absolute, final. "You have arrived." And I understood. I would never leave. If this story made you see the darkness in a new way, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss future horror stories. What would you have done in the hero's place? Share your ideas in the comments. They could inspire the next chilling tale.